The first time Helena Voss noticed Elias Grant, he was kneeling beneath her $500 million cruise ship with one ear pressed against the steel. The ship towered above him inside Dry Dock 3, white hull rising like a wall, polished blue lettering still covered in protective film, decks stacked high enough to throw shade across the workers below. Cameras waited beyond the safety fence. Investors stood under a temporary canopy with champagne glasses they had not yet been allowed to use. Reporters had already begun filming the bow, where a silver ribbon stretched across the dock for the launch ceremony scheduled that afternoon. Elias did not look at any of it. He was under the starboard side near frame section C41, work jacket dusty, welding hood pushed back, one palm flat against the metal, the other holding a battered listening device no bigger than a flashlight. Its cable ran to a small recorder clipped to his belt. A green line moved across the tiny screen, trembling with every vibration that passed through the hull. His 8-year-old daughter Maya stood behind the yellow barrier, holding a lunch bag and watching him with a worried seriousness that made her look older than she was. Helena Voss crossed the dry dock in a navy suit and white hard hat, followed by 3 executives, 2 marine surveyors and her head of construction. She had been smiling for the cameras 5 minutes earlier. She was not smiling now. "Why is a welder touching the hull after final inspection?" she asked. No one answered fast enough. Elias tapped the steel once with a small rubber hammer, then listened again. Helena stepped closer. "Mr. Grant." He looked up slowly. "There's a wrong sound in this section." One of the surveyors laughed under his breath, the short, embarrassed laugh of a professional hearing something unprofessional. Helena glanced at the device in Elias' hand. "That is your evidence." "It repeats." "The Aurora Meridian passed ultrasonic inspection yesterday, class review this morning, and final structural clearance 27 minutes ago." Elias stood. He was 39, broad-shouldered, tired around the eyes, with hands rough from years of heat, steel, salt, and work that did not forgive carelessness. He did not look intimidated by Helena. He looked concerned by the ship. "I know what the paperwork says." "Then why are you still under my vessel with a toy?" Maya lowered her eyes. Elias' jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. "It is not a toy." Helena looked toward the investors, then toward the cameras, then back at the man holding up her ceremony. "This is a $500 million cruise ship, Mr. Grant. It is not a backyard fishing boat. I am not delaying launch because a day-shift welder heard a ghost in the metal." Elias looked at the hull again. "It is not a ghost." "What is it then?" "A crack trying to become one." The words hung in the dry dock for one quiet second. Then Helena turned away. "Clear him from the launch area. If there is no documented defect, this ceremony proceeds." 4 hours later, the Aurora Meridian would still be sitting inside the dock, launch canceled, champagne warm, cameras gone silent, and the same executives who laughed would be staring at a long-hidden fracture running behind a reinforced weld seam. Helena Voss would stand beneath the hull with water still dripping from the inspection line, realizing that the man she dismissed had heard danger before her experts could see it. Harbor Crown Shipworks had built vessels for 78 years. Cargo ships, ferries, research boats, military support craft, luxury yachts, but nothing in its history matched the Aurora Meridian. The ship was designed for 4,200 passengers, 1,600 crew, 14 restaurants, 2 theaters, a medical deck, 3 swimming pools, and enough suites to make travel magazines fight over first photographs. It had been commissioned by Meridian Blue Cruises, financed through international investors, and built under deadlines so tight every delay felt like a public confession. For Helena Voss, the Aurora was more than a contract. It was the proof she had promised the board when they gave her the company after her father's death. Helena had spent 6 years turning Harbor Crown from a respected but aging shipyard into a modern builder, capable of competing with European and Asian giants. She automated sections of the yard, replaced managers who confused loyalty with competence, negotiated with unions without blinking, and convinced investors that American shipbuilding still had teeth. She was admired, feared, and rarely forgiven for being right. But somewhere during those years, Helena had begun trusting systems more than people. Reports arrived in clean folders. Certifications came stamped and signed. Digital dashboards showed green where human doubt used to live. She liked evidence. She liked documentation. She liked any truth that could be formatted into a presentation before it reached her desk. Elias Grant did not fit that format. On paper, he was a contract welder assigned to interior support seams and emergency rework. His personnel file listed marine welding certifications, old project references, and a quiet note from the hearing supervisor saying he was excellent, difficult to rush. It did not mention that he had once been a marine structural engineer. It did not mention the ferry accident. It did not mention why a man who understood hull stress models better than some surveyors now worked night shifts with a torch in his hand. Elias preferred it that way. 9 years earlier, he had been part of an engineering review team for a coastal ferry line. A vessel named South Bay Queen had shown minor flex fatigue near a stern reinforcement. Elias recommended immediate service suspension. The operating company pushed back. The lead engineer softened the language. The ferry remained active for 3 more months. During a winter crossing, the weakened section failed under heavy sea stress. The accident did not sink the ferry, but it caused flooding, panic, injuries, and 1 death. Elias' wife, Nora, had been on board. She was not supposed to be. She had switched shifts at the clinic to visit her sister across the bay. By the time Elias reached the hospital, she was gone and Maya was 3 years old, asleep in a neighbor's arms, too young to understand that the world had just broken. After the investigation, Elias testified. He named the warning. He named the change in the report. He named the cost of making danger sound manageable. The industry called him brave in public and inconvenient in private. Work became scarce. Consulting offers disappeared. A supervisor told him quietly that nobody wanted an engineer who might destroy a launch over a hairline uncertainty. Elias stopped applying. Welding paid less, but steel did not care about reputation. Steel only cared about heat, pressure, stress, and time. So he returned to the yard as a man with tools instead of a title. Maya knew pieces of the story, but not all of it. She knew her mother had died on a ferry. She knew her father did not like ships leaving dock when he was worried. She knew he listened to steel because, in his words, metal spoke before it failed. That morning, Maya's school had closed for a teacher planning day. The neighbor who usually watched her was at a medical appointment. Elias had tried to trade shifts, but launch day had pulled every available worker into the yard. He brought Maya with a backpack, headphones, and the promise she would stay behind the safety barrier. She had not complained. She rarely complained when she knew money or work was involved. "Is the big ship safe?" she asked when they arrived. Elias looked up at the Aurora's hull. "It should be." Maya knew him well enough to hear the space inside that answer. By 7:40, the yard felt less like a workplace and more like a stage. Workers had been told to keep tools organized and paint touch-ups discreet. Management moved through the dock with clipped radios and nervous smiles. The launch banner read a new era ATC. Elias was supposed to check minor weld dressing along a lower service access frame. He did that in 12 minutes. Then he heard it. A tapping crew 2 sections away struck the hull with alignment hammers as part of a routine final procedure. Each strike sent a faint vibration through the steel. Most of it traveled cleanly. One note did not. It ended too quickly, swallowed by something inside the seam near C41. Elias stopped moving. He tapped the hull himself, once, twice, then moved 6 inches and tapped again. There it was. A dullness after the ring, not dramatic, not loud, a missing echo. He pulled the listening device from his bag. The tool was old, rebuilt from marine acoustic equipment and parts from a pond pipe inspection kit. It looked cheap because half of it was. The software was his, written at night after Maya slept. It compared resonance patterns in steel sections and flagged interruptions that formal inspections sometimes missed when a defect sat behind reinforcement or weld geometry. It had no official approval. It had saved him from trusting easy silence more than once. He ran the scan 3 times, the signal repeated. At 8:15, he called his supervisor, Tom Arlen. Tom arrived eating a breakfast sandwich. He did not finish after seeing Elias' face. "No," Tom said immediately. "I haven't said anything. You have the look. It is in C-41. Tom closed his eyes. "Elias." It repeats. The ship cleared final. Then final missed something. Tom looked toward the upper dock, where Helena was walking investors past the bow. "Do you understand what today is?" "Yes." "Do you understand what happens if we delay launch without proof?" "Yes." "What can you prove?" Elias held up the device. Tom stared at it. "That is not proof to Helena Voss. It is proof enough to inspect." Tom lowered his voice. "You need a certified indication. I need 4 hours with access panels opened and a manual seam check. You need a miracle." "No," Elias said. "I need people to be less afraid of embarrassment than water." Tom did not like that, not because it was wrong. He took the concern to construction leadership. Construction took it to safety. Safety took it to marine survey. By the time it reached Helena, the warning had been translated from possible hidden crack behind C-41 seam into welder requesting additional non-standard acoustic check after final clearance. That translation was easier to dismiss. Helena came down herself because the launch was too important to let rumor move through the yard unsupervised. She found Elias kneeling under the hull, Maya watching behind the barrier, and the device blinking in his hand. The rest happened quickly. The question, the laughter, the dismissal, the order to clear him. Elias did not shout. He did not beg. He marked the section with a small chalk circle before 2 managers stepped closer and told him to move away. Helena noticed the chalk. "Remove that before the press walkthrough." Elias looked at her. "If you paint over warnings, they do not disappear." She held his gaze. "No, Mr. Grant. But unsupported warnings can become sabotage when they threaten hundreds of jobs and years of work." Maya heard that. Elias did too. He picked up his bag, took Maya's hand, and walked to the edge of the dock. The ceremony preparations continued. At 10:30, reporters filmed the ship's name. At 10:50, the mayor arrived. At 11:15, the investors took photos beside Helena. At 11:40, the launch crew began final ballast checks. Pumps moved water into holding sections. The ship settled by design, shifting weight toward the launch cradle. Elias sat with Maya in an unused maintenance bay near the dock entrance. He should have gone home. He did not. Maya ate crackers from her lunch bag. "Are you fired?" "Not yet." "Are you going to be?" "Maybe." She nodded as if adding that to a list of things adults made harder than necessary. Was Mom's fairy like this? Elias looked at the floor. "No." But people didn't listen then either. He turned toward her. Maya's face was calm, but her fingers were tight around the cracker package. "You were little." "I'm not little now." He swallowed. "No, you are not." "Then don't let the ship go if you heard it." The simplicity of it hurt. At 12, 05, the ballast transfer reached the section near C41. Elias heard the change from across the maintenance bay. It came through the floor before it came through the air. A low shifting vibration, then a faint metallic knock that most people would have mistaken for a chain moving somewhere in the dock. Elias stood. Maya stood too. Outside, Tom Arlen was walking past with a radio. "Tom." He turned. Elias said one word. "Now." Tom's face went pale. "What did you hear?" The section loaded. The radio on Tom's shoulder crackled. A ballast technician reported an unusual strain reading on the starboard lower hull sensor, then corrected himself, saying it had returned to normal. The official system marked it transient. Elias was already moving. He reached the access corridor under the hull as the launch countdown rehearsal began above. Workers in clean jackets stood ready near the ribbon. A string quartet tested microphones near the viewing platform. Helena was giving a short interview about precision, confidence, and the future. Elias crossed the safety line. A supervisor shouted after him. He ignored it. At C41, the chalk mark had been smeared but not erased. He placed the listening device against the hull and tapped the steel. The sound was worse. Not louder, worse. The missing echo had grown teeth. Tom arrived behind him with 2 safety officers. "Elias, if we stop this now. If you do not stop this now, you will wish paperwork could float." Tom raised his radio. "Hold launch prep. Repeat, hold launch prep." The first response was confusion, then anger, then Helena's voice cut through the channel. "Who authorized a hold?" Tom looked at Elias. "I did." Helena reached the lower dock 2 minutes later with her face set like steel. "What is happening?" Elias pointed to the hull. "The defect is opening under ballast load." Grant Sloan, the lead marine surveyor, arrived carrying a tablet and the patience of a man asked to disprove something annoying. "We have no visual crack. It is behind the reinforcement." Grant scanned the area. External weld looks intact. The outside can look intact while the backing structure fails. Grant glanced at Helena. "With respect, that is speculative." Elias handed him the listening device. "Then listen." Grant looked at it like Elias had handed him a child's toy. "I use certified ultrasonic equipment." "Then use it." Grant did. He brought the official unit, placed the probe along the seam, and ran a quick check. The first pass showed nothing conclusive. Helena's expression hardened. Then Elias said, "Angle down 12 degrees. Slow the scan. You are crossing over it." Grant's eyes narrowed, but he adjusted. The screen flickered. A small irregularity appeared, then vanished. Grant froze. "Again," Elias said. Grant ran the scan again, slower. This time, the indication held. A hidden discontinuity beneath the reinforcement, long, thin, and positioned exactly where Elias had marked the hull. The dock went quiet in stages. First Grant stopped speaking, then Tom, then the safety officers. Finally, Helena noticed the silence around her and understood that it had changed shape. "What does that mean?" she asked. Grant did not answer quickly. Elias did. "It means we open the section before this ship moves another inch." The launch was paused under the official phrase, technical verification delay. The press was told to wait. Investors were guided back to the canopy. Helena remained at the lower dock while workers cut access to the reinforced seam. The first layer came off clean. The second showed rust-colored stress dust. The third revealed the crack. It ran behind the welded reinforcement like a dark vein, longer than the first reading suggested, branching at one end toward a stress point tied into the ballast loading path. It had not opened to the outer hull yet. That was the only mercy. Under full launch stress, as the ship shifted weight and entered water, the fracture could have propagated. Maybe it would have caused immediate flooding. Maybe it would have weakened the section and failed at sea days later. Maybe nothing catastrophic would have happened on launch day. Maybe was not a word responsible people used under a ship carrying thousands. Grant stared at the exposed damage, his face drained. Tom swore quietly. Helena did not speak for almost a full minute. The cameras above were still waiting. The champagne was still waiting. The ribbon was still tied. The ship was no longer ready. Elias stood a few feet back with Maya behind him. She had slipped her hand into his without asking. Helena finally turned. "Mr. Grant." He looked at her. "How did you hear that?" He could have said, "Because I told you." He could have said, "Because I was right." He could have said all the things people imagine they will say when vindicated. Instead, he looked at the crack. Steel changes its voice before it fails. Maya added softly, "He listens." Everyone heard her. Helena looked at the child, and for the first time that day, she seemed to understand that her dismissal had not landed on one man alone. By late afternoon, the launch was officially canceled. The announcement used careful language: additional structural review, commitment to safety, revised launch date pending inspection. Investors were not happy. Meridian Blue Cruises demanded a full explanation. Reporters sensed blood and began asking why a final cleared ship had suddenly developed a structural concern. Helena handled the first hour like a CEO: strong posture, controlled answers, no panic, no admission beyond what legal approved. Then she went back under the hull. Elias was still there, helping mark the inspection boundary because nobody knew the sound path better than he did. Maya sat nearby with Tom's assistant, drawing the ship with a bandage on its side. Helena stopped beside Elias. "I owe you an apology." He kept looking at the exposed crack. "Yes." Tom turned away, pretending to check his radio. Helena accepted the answer. "I dismissed your warning." "Yes." "I questioned your integrity." "You suggested sabotage." Her face tightened. "Yes." "My daughter heard that." Helena looked toward Maya. "I know." "No," Elias said, "you know now." The sentence did not accuse loudly. It landed more heavily because of that. Helena stood with it. "You are right." Elias looked at her then. She lost her mother because people made a warning sound smaller than a schedule. Helena's eyes moved to Maya again. For the first time, she saw more than the child at a work site. She saw a girl holding herself carefully in a shipyard built around the same kind of decisions that had once taken her mother away. "I am sorry," Helena said. Elias did not forgive her immediately. He did not punish her either. He nodded once. That was all she had earned. The investigation lasted 6 days. Once the first section was opened, the problem became larger. A subcontracted reinforcement plate had been installed with a hidden alignment flaw. During welding, heat distribution had created stress at a concealed edge. Standard inspection had passed because the outer seam looked clean, and the defect sat beneath geometry that scattered the signal unless the scan angle was changed. The ship had not been doomed, but it had been dangerous. Dangerous enough that if Elias had stayed quiet, Harbor Crown would have launched a vessel with a structural defect no one could honestly defend. The board wanted to control the story. Helena surprised them. At the press briefing, she stood in front of the dry dock with the Aurora Meridian behind her and said, "The launch was stopped because one of our workers identified a structural warning after final inspection. That worker was correct. The system missed it. He did not." A reporter asked his name. Helena hesitated only once. "Elias Grant." By the next morning, his name moved through the yard. Some workers slapped his shoulder. Others avoided him because gratitude can feel like embarrassment when it arrives late. Grant Sloan, the surveyor, found him under the hull with the official ultrasonic unit and said, "Show me the angle again." Elias did. Grant listened this time. On the 8th day, Helena called Elias into the main conference room. He arrived in work clothes because he had been told not to change. Maya came with him because school had closed early again, and because Helena had specifically said she was welcome. That mattered. Around the table sat Helena, Tom, Grant, the safety director, legal counsel, 2 board members, and a representative from Meridian Blue Cruises. Elias stood rather than sit. Helena began. Harbor Crown is creating an independent structural listening team for high-risk vessels and critical weld geometry. I want you to lead it. Elias stared at her. I am a contract welder. No, you are a structural engineer working as a contract welder, because the industry punished you for telling the truth. The room went still. Elias did not like how much she had learned. Helena continued. I read the South Bay Queen files. His face closed. Maya looked up at him. Helena's voice softened, but not enough to become pity. You were right then, too. Elias looked at the table. Being right late does not bring anyone back. No, Helena said, but being heard early might keep someone else from needing to be brought back. The words found the room's quiet center. The job offer was real, full authority to request secondary inspection, direct reporting to safety, not production, written procedure requiring any launch hold override to be signed by the CEO, the safety director, and the lead surveyor with public internal record. Elias requested that last part himself. Helena agreed. A board member objected. That level of authority could delay major contracts. Elias looked at him. Yes. The board member blinked. Helena said, that is why it is authority. Maya smiled down at her notebook. Elias accepted 3 days later. The Aurora Meridian launched 11 weeks late. The second ceremony was smaller, no string quartet, less champagne, more workers. Helena insisted the people who built the ship stand closer than the investors. The repaired section had been inspected, documented, reinforced, and rechecked by 3 independent teams. Elias' listening team had mapped the entire lower hull. Grant Sloan signed the new clearance personally. Before the launch, Maya asked if she could stand near the barrier where she could see the water. Elias looked at the ship. You sure? She nodded. I want to see one leave safe. He could not speak for a moment. When the Aurora finally moved, sliding toward the water under controlled release, the yard held its breath. Steel supports groaned. Water accepted the hull. The great ship shifted, floated, steadied. No wrong sound came. Maya squeezed Elias' hand. It sounds okay, she whispered. Elias listened. Really listened. Then he nodded. It does. Helena stood 20 feet away, watching them more than the cameras. She understood then that the launch success belonged not to her speeches or the investors or the ribbon, but to the pause that had saved the ship before celebration could turn into regret. 6 months later, Harbor Crown's Structural Listening Unit occupied a former storage office overlooking Dry Dock 3. It held modern acoustic equipment, certified ultrasonic systems, resonance mapping tools, and on one shelf, Elias' battered handmade listening device. Not retired, never decorative. He still used it sometimes when new equipment gave answers too polished to trust. Maya visited after school on Fridays. She did homework at a small desk Helena had ordered without making a speech about it. On the wall above the desk hung Maya's drawing of the Aurora with a bandage on its side. Under it, someone had placed a plaque. Some warnings whisper. Elias pretended not to care about the plaque. Everyone knew he did. Helena changed too, though not into a softer person. She remained direct, demanding, and difficult to impress. But when reports arrived green, she began asking what had been hard to measure. When schedules tightened, she asked who disagreed. When someone used the phrase minor anomaly, she asked who had listened to it twice. That one question changed the yard. A year after the delayed launch, Harbor Crown won a Safety Innovation Award for integrating human acoustic review with advanced structural inspection. Helena accepted the award but made Elias stand beside her. He hated the stage. Maya loved it. A reporter asked him what made his method special. Elias looked uncomfortable. "It is not special." Helena looked amused. The reporter waited. Elias added, "Most failures announce themselves. The hard part is making people quiet enough to hear." That quote appeared in every article. The industry that had once made him inconvenient began calling him visionary. He did not trust the word. Visionary sounded like something people said after they had survived ignoring you. One evening, long after the award and long after the Aurora completed its first successful season at sea, Elias and Maya walked through Dry Dock 3. A new vessel sat under construction, ribs exposed, welders throwing blue light across the floor. The yard smelled of steel, salt, heat, and rain. Maya was taller now. She still carried a notebook, though she no longer held it to her chest like armor. "Dad." "Yeah." "Do you think Mom would like that ship?" Elias looked at the unfinished hull. "She would ask if it was safe first." Maya smiled. "Then she would ask if it had good food." He laughed quietly. "Yes, she would." They stopped near section C-41, where the repaired hull of the Aurora had once stood before launch. The dock was empty there now, but Elias could still remember the sound, the missing echo, the warning that had almost been painted over by ceremony. Maya slipped her hand into his. "You heard it for her too, didn't you?" Elias looked down. For years he had told himself he listened because it was his work, because steel gave warnings, because truth mattered before paperwork. All of that was real. None of it was the whole answer. "Yes," he said, "I think I did." Across the dock, Helena watched from the upper walkway. She had come to check progress on a new build and stopped when she saw them below. She did not interrupt. Some moments, she had learned, did not belong to leadership. Beside her, a young project manager said, "The schedule on Vessel 42 is getting tight." Helena kept watching Elias and Maya. "Then we listen earlier." The project manager hesitated. "To what?" Helena turned toward the unfinished hull. "To anyone who hears something we do not." Below, Elias lifted his old device and tapped the steel of the new ship once. The note rang clean through the dock. Maya looked at him. "Good." He listened until the sound faded. "Good." The word settled between them, simple and earned. Some people build ships because the world pays for movement. Some people launch them because cameras are waiting. Some people sign papers because every box is green. And some people kneel beneath the steel. Ignore the ceremony and listen for the one sound nobody else wants to hear. That was Elias Grant's gift. Not that he could hear metal better than other men, but that he understood what warnings cost when people make them small. And because of him, the Aurora Meridian did not leave the dock as a beautiful mistake. It left later, stronger, safer, and carrying, hidden deep in its repaired hull, the quiet proof that sometimes the bravest thing a father can do is stop the world from moving until the truth has been heard.